So congratulations, you probably went out and bought yourself a 2013, 2014, 2015 Honda Accord 4-cylinder. In this case, this is what it's gonna look like when you open up the hood. And today what we're going to talk about is what's going on under here. So it's better to know, especially when you go take it in for service or if you're going to do it yourself, what things are and where they're placed. So today we're going to kind of go through that and go through some of the basics and some of the not so basics. So what we have here is a 2.4 liter inline 4, so 4 cylinders going across. And in this case is actually a manual transmission. I've had my 2013 for over a year now, about 46,000 miles on it. I drive a lot, I know, but I needed a car that was going to last me a long time. First time when I go in to look at a car, I don't look at what it looks like, honestly. It has to look, not like crap, but I go in and I take a look at under the hood and how easy it is to service. And by far, the Honda was the easiest to service by just looking at it, the way things are laid out. Next to the Camry. Camry's pretty easy to service too, but there's more simplicity here with the Accord, way things are laid out, where they're placed, so on and so forth. So let's start with the basics here. Oil cap. Now, all these newer motors have a need for 0-weight-20 oil, and the reason for that is the tolerances are much tighter in this motor than they ever were before, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. Do not put anything but 0-weight-20 on this, and if you can, at least a synthetic blend, if not a full synthetic. Now the change ratio on this is 10,000 miles. They're saying I wouldn't do that. I try to keep it at 5,000 miles. That's me personally. If you want to go 10,000, that's more than up to you. But for me, I'm looking to get 300,000 miles out of this car, so I'm going to go with the 5,000 mile change. So 0-20 in the oil. This is your valve cover that's buried under all this plastic, earth drain, so on and so forth. And below this cover right here is the module that controls the direct injection. Now, a lot of people hear direct injection, it's a new fangled technology. No, it's not. Actually, it's been used on diesels for a long time. The issue has been the engines that use direct injection with gasoline have a tendency of not being able to pass smog, and that's because since the fuel is shot directly into the cylinder tends to run just a little bit hotter, and without really precise control of how the the way the gasoline's burning, it can cause emissions to go up. But now with the next generation of OBD2 computers, it can actually go in and very, very minutely adjust that timing in order to make sure that the emissions stay low. So in Honda's case, everyone does it a little differently. This is actually how diesels do it. You have a fuel pump in the tank that's going to pump fuel up to the rail here, which meets up in this area right here, integrated into the head unit. And what it does is it has a mechanical pump built into the head that runs off the valve train. And what that does is it takes it from a normal fuel pressure up to 40,000, I do believe it's 40,000 PSI, don't quote me on that, right here, right at the point of injection. You don't want to pump 40,000 PSI from the tank to here. You want it from the right at as close to the injectors as possible. So you have a modular mechanical pump here that can be removed. It has a sensor right here, obviously, it has a pressure value. It's telling it it's reaching its proper pressure. So if there is an issue, that's where it's going to tell it that there's a problem, is right here. And it's shooting the fuel directly into the injectors. Directly into the cylinders. Sorry. So what's the difference from that and the traditional way of doing it? Traditional way of doing it is called a multi-port or port injection, meaning that where the air comes in from right here into your throttle body and then goes into the actual cylinders. You'll see usually 4 ducts that go and feed into the head. There's usually the injectors sit right before the head. So it means the fuel is actually coming on the back side of the valves. So the valves are what's opening and shutting, allowing the air fuel mixture to enter the cylinder. Direct injection now actually takes it from before the valve and puts it in front of the valve, meaning that it's going directly and be atomized directly into the cylinder. That's why you need the higher pressure, because you are forcing fuel into a cylinder that is compressed up to 200 psi. So you have to force the fuel in there. Why is that better? Better ionization, faster combustion. It's a better process. It works better, but there are downsides to it in gasoline motors, and the downside is that the gasoline motors burn a lot hotter than a diesel. That's why you haven't seen them like jump into these motors, is that exact reason. So their materials have increased in their ability to withstand those temperatures, because that's where it landed, was that over time the ability for it to last a long time was not there. It literally probably last you 50,000-60,000 miles before you need to replace those injectors. That issue is relatively gone. We'll see. You know, I haven't had 100,000 miles yet, but I haven't had any issues. I don't expect to. So that's the basic laydown of what you have going on there. Now, what I like about what Honda did here was everything's integrated into the head. The actual molded head is created so that most of the things are internal to it, meaning that this isn't standalone. It's a modular unit, but it fits directly into the head assembly. I like that. Same thing with the exhaust manifold. You notice that there's not an exhaust manifold per se here where it goes 4-to-1 or however it may go. The difference here is that the 4-to-1 is built into the actual casting of the head. And the head is the cylinder head. That's actually what contains the valves and everything, and then the lower part is where it contains the pistons. So it's a cleaner look, and it's polished inside versus a casting, so it gives you a better flow coming into the exhaust manifold. So this is your exhaust manifold. Looks a little bit different because it's only one pipe coming off of this central unit. So right off the top here, you'll see something that's sticking out of the top. That is your O2 sensor. You usually have at least 2 O2 sensors. A lot of people go, why do you need an oxygen sensor to measure exhaust gases? Well, it's measuring the efficiency of the motor and how efficiently it is burning the fuel, and it uses that information along with other sensors to decide what the depending on conditions, because there's several sensors that input information, the optimal fuel air ratio that is needed for the engine to run properly. It's pretty cool, actually. I mean, a lot of people, I like working on old cars. I worked on a lot of old cars, but once you know how to work on these and you know how to work with the scan gauges, and you can read live information without hooking up a bunch of sensors, you just hook one thing up, you can see everything. It is great. I understand why people don't like it. A lot of people got hit up by that first OBD1 system and using paper clips and having computers go bad. That is a thing of the past. It happens, but it's very rare. It doesn't happen like it used to. So let's go back to the O2 sensor. So what this is doing is it's calculating what the oxygen content is in the, it's doing two things actually, sorry. It also is telling the engine whether or not that catalytic converter is working. So the first thing we want to say it does, that's why you have two different ones. So you have one that's downstream and one that's upstream. So this is your upstream O2 sensor. And what it's doing is it's measuring the burn rate of the engine, what it's burning and what it's leaving behind based on an oxygen count. It's much more sensitive than the second sensor. That's why when you go to buy one, that upstream one is always more expensive. So what it's going to do is tell the engine based on that O2 reading how well the engine's burning fuel. So there shouldn't be a lot of oxygen content, obviously, after the fuel is burned. So after that, you have a catalytic converter. And a lot of people see these catalytic converters and they get really close to the exhaust manifold. Well, a lot of people don't know is catalytic converters need to get up to 500 degrees to start operating. And it's a catalyst. Remember, catalyst is once it meets another substance, it will, I know it's not substance, but it meets another gas or something, compound, it catalyzes, meaning that as the exhaust mix comes out of here, the catalytic converter, once it reaches 500 degrees using platinum and other metals, will react with it, causing it to create water. And that's why you see water drip out the back of your pipe. So it's taking a NOx and it's taking it, which is a volatile small chemical, and converting it over to water. And that's why you see it come out of your pipe. Now, the reason you have two O2 sensors is that it's going to measure the front and back end of that. So it's going to see if there's a difference. And there should be a difference, because once it goes to through that catalytic converter, the reading should change. And if it doesn't change, that could mean that your catalytic converter is bad. So that's a lot of times when they hook it up and they want us to check your catalytic converter, that's how they're going to do it. They're going to see the differences. If this value and the second value based on the scan gauge are the same, that means the catalytic converter is not working. That's why it's so imperative that you keep this engine running good, because if unburnt fuel gets out of this engine and hits that catalytic converter, it will melt. There's no joke about it. you just want to make sure that you always keep this engine running well. Even, you know, that's why it's really dangerous. And now everyone says catalytic converter safe, but pumping anything down your intake. It's exactly that. If this engine fails to burn the fuel properly and gets it to that catalytic converter, you can have a catastrophic failure. And in this case, because of the way these are designed now, you can't simply just cut them out and replace them. You have to buy the remanufactured units or anything like that. That can be much more expensive. So, moving along. Let's talk about, you have a lot of these engines, these 4 cylinders, the way they're laid out is actually very similar. So if you've worked on other imports, you'll probably see that a lot of things are the same. Alternator usually on top. Alternators are much better than they used to be. I mean, I very rarely replace an alternator nowadays. I just don't see it. Older cars, it was a regular thing. They have internal voltage meters. Everything is internalized into the actual unit itself. You don't have outside things other than the monitors that are measuring. So you just have your big positive output, and then you have this monitor right here, and negative, that's going to basically give it background information, letting it know whether or not the alternator is working or not. So alternator right here, this is where you're going to check your oil. I suggest everyone check it on a regular basis. I mean, this could be the difference between life and death, and what I mean by that is life and death of the motor. If an engine ever runs low on oil, you are causing permanent damage. And when I say permanent, I mean replace the motor, replace hard parts. Hard parts meaning that the valve, piston rings, that means bearings, that there's things that will burn up that you cannot just add an additive to and fix. The best way to describe that is take your hands together, rub them together. And you feel how hot that gets and how quickly it gets. Well, put some oil or lotion between your hands, do the same thing, and you'll realize the difference, and that's what the oil is doing for this motor. And it actually acts as a lubricated bearing within between those parts. And because this uses a 0-20 oil, which is much thinner, it's for those tighter tolerances, meaning that those tighter tolerances need to be oiled at all times. So remember that. Check that oil, make sure. That's why I don't like going 10,000 miles, exactly because of that. Okay, so like most units, you have your radiator up front here, radiator caps on the left, and over here, and this is not where you're going to check it, especially when it's hot. You will have a reservoir on this side, and then you'll have a reading on the edge here and the bottom, and then I'll tell you, you want to check it both when it's cold and when it's hot, because you'll usually get 2 different ratings depending on the expansion ratio. Because remember, as fluids get hotter, they expand. So this is why you have a cap here. The cap has a spring, allows the excess fluid to push back into the reservoir while the car is running. So that's why that fluid level is going up and down. Windshield washer fluid's right here on the side of that. Don't mix those two up. I know it's easy to do. Remember, they try to do color coding. You'll see different colors for different things. That's why orange is definitely put there to make it stand out to you. When you check your oil, remember to wipe it off in the first pass, and on the second pass, then you should get a proper reading. And remember, between the 2 dots here, it's 1 quart. So if you're at that bottom line, it'll take 1 quart to bring the oil level back up to full. Do not overfill your oil. You'll hear that a lot, but you won't hear why. If you overfill your oil, it actually causes the oil pump to push too much oil up here into your valve train. So that's what it's doing. It's taking oil from the pan from the bottom of the motor, pushing it up and depositing it here in the valve train. And then it goes to the oil galleries and recycles back down to the motor. And that way you're just constantly streaming a rain shower of oil over the motor. Now, if you overfill it, you have what's called a PCV system, and that's a positive crankcase ventilation system. And what it's doing is it's taking the pressure that's built up, because you know every engine has blow-by, so as those cylinders are pumping back and forth, it's actually building up pressure inside this casing. And it used to be in older cars, you had like a filter or something like that to exhaust the vapors out of the. You can't do that anymore. It's considered an emission problem. So what they do instead is they recapture those vapors back into the intake and recycle them back into the motor. Problem is, you overfill your oil will contaminate that system. Too much oil will get up here, it'll go through this line right here and feed right back into your intake. So you will get oil feeding back into your system. There's different ways to stop that from happening, usually in race cars, not on everyday driving cars. But they're oil catch systems and stuff like that, so that oil does not cycle back into the engine. You also have the same thing for a purge valve that hooks up to your gas tank that pressurizes your gas tank the same way. And what it's doing is it's pressurizing and it's taking those vapors and recycling back into the motor, so you're not leaking fuel vapors into the air. Those are the 2 systems that are created there to keep vapors from escaping the motor or the gas tank. So I hope I didn't go through that too fast, but that's a pretty simple system. That right there is exactly what that does. A lot of times there's a valve. I haven't checked to see if there's a valve. Some of these systems don't have a valve. It really depends on the system, but generally there's a valve, and usually it would be right in this area right there, or buried a little deeper. So that's that. This system and all most of the car systems have now gone to an electric type steering. And I know a lot of people hate electric steering because it's numb. It feels like you're driving a video game, whatever. Hydraulic systems have better feel, but hydraulic systems do not last. They just don't last. The only reason that car companies went to an electric system was two reasons. Number one, newer cars will be able to take control of the vehicle from you. You still have a direct line to the steering rack. It's not like you're not driving the car. It's an electric assisted motor, but at the same time, because it's assisted by electronics, it gives a feedback. It gives feedback to the computer, and the computer can actually control that motor as well. That's why you have cars that can self-drive. Can it take control directly from you? Probably not. If you hold that tight, it isn't going to go anywhere. Now, this car does not have that. You'll know if your car has that. It will be listed when you buy the car. It'll say, you know, adaptive cruise control or whatever, something that says that it has the ability to take control of the vehicle from you. And as long as we're talking about, we'll get into the next thing. I've never liked hydraulic steering. It actually, not having it has simplified the belt routing here, because now all you're driving is an alternator, water pump, and air conditioner, and your main pulley, and that's it. So you only have a couple accessories here now that are hooked up, and it's much easier to replace a belt when you only have the couple things versus you have, you know, a whole multitude of things that are hooked up, including one would generally be a steering pump either on the back side or between here that's, you know, with 100,000 miles leaking oil all over the place. So since we're talking about the vehicle taking control from you, if you have traction control, the car has the ability to take the driving away from you if, you know, you don't know how to drive. So you have your master cylinder on that side. Because this is a stick manual transmission, you'll have a slave cylinder. That's why it has that extra little container right there. That's the fluid for the slave cylinder that controls the clutch. But that main one with the yellow on the top, that is your master cylinder. That will feed pressure using vacuum. So it takes a diaphragm that's large and spreads vacuum over it to increase its power exponentially. And that will cause, that's why you only have to push the brake pedal just a little bit to get it to go. Now the diaphragm itself is behind there. You can't see it from here, but it sits behind there. It feeds that pressure over to this unit right here, which is an ABS control unit. And what does this do? Well, if you notice, there's 4 separate lines coming out of this. And there's 4 separate lines because this little motor right here can individually control, via this wire harness, every wheel individually. That means it can stop any one of these wheels by itself. And that's what the traction control is doing. It is taking, in this case, Honda's a little bit different. Everyone does it a little differently, but in Honda's case, they have an ABS sensor at each one of the wheels. And it's just basically a speed sensor that measures how fast each one of those wheels is going. Also, it takes the steering in account as well. Yeah, so it knows how fast you're going and what you're doing with the wheel. Now, it has a yaw sensor also in the car, telling the car if it's like banking or something bad's happening. So all that information is used together to decide for the car if it's losing control. So if your car's skidding out, it can individually tell one of the wheels to stop to straighten the vehicle out. So I tell a lot of people this: if you have traction control, let the car do its work. It is designed to straighten itself out. If you fight against the car, you're going to crash. The car will stop itself. It will allow you to get into a more favorable position versus flipping your car. Will it work 100% of the time? Probably not. But remember, it does have the ability here to control each one of these wheels individually on braking, not acceleration. It can take the power away from you as well, because all newer cars are drive-by-wire. And what drive-by-wire means is that on the throttle body, so this is your air filter, mass airflow sensor feeding into your throttle body, you'll see there's a motor on this side. There's no throttle body where there's a cable that hooks up anymore. Now, a lot of people get freaked out by that, I understand. But what it can do now is it can take that away from you as well. If you're full throttling it and you're trying to, you know, do something stupid, it's going to say no. It's going to take that power from you. It's going to try to correct the vehicle. Is it defeatable? Yes, you can turn that off. and it's inside the vehicle, look in your manual, and you have to hold the button down, I think 3 seconds, and it'll shut it off. So it is possible. So this is designed for obviously mud, rain, snow, and that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to save your life. Also, you'll notice Honda left us with a upper strut bar. Very nice of them. Helps with the vehicle's stability. You guys have any questions on it, put in the comment section. I'll try to answer them best as I can. Once we were talking here about the expansion tank here for the radiator, you have a upper hose and a lower hose. And the way the system's working is that you have a radiator on the front here. You have a thermostat, usually 1 or 2. In this case, I think it only has 1 right here, that's controlling the amount of fluid that's moving, that's being pumped through the motor. And what it's doing is it's maintaining a certain temperature. And the way it does that is based on the temperature. There's a reactive thermostat there, it has a spring in it. It will allow more or less fluid to flow through the motor. Now, this is a heat sink system, meaning that you have a large radiator that can displace heat on a large scale, meaning that it can take the hotter fluid that's in here, roll it through the radiator and cool it down, and then return it back to the motor, trying to maintain a certain value. Now, doing that using a thermostat will allow it to monitor how much more or less it's allowing to flow through it. Now, that's why you have to make sure that you keep your fluid changed. You know, I think it's 5-year, 100,000 miles, but make sure you do it, because if the radiator gets scale or anything inside of it, you lose your cooling ability, meaning that it cannot transfer heat onto out of the radiator as efficiently if it has scale in it. It has to be clean. That's why you want to make sure to do that. And you may go, well, why does an engine need a radiator? Remember, we're burning gasoline here. The lubricant in the motor does a little bit of a job keeping it cool, but when you're running air conditioning or putting excessive load on the motor via the AC compressor, you need that additional ability to cool the motor. That's also why you have the 2 fans. One fan is controlled by a thermostat, meaning if the hot car gets too hot. The second one is placed behind the radiator where the the AC condenser is, and that's allowing, anytime the AC goes on, it's going to turn that fan on to keep the AC condenser cool. Hose going over the top here, that is your low pressure line feeding into your air conditioner. Honda did actually a cool thing finally. They've always kind of put their AC compressor down here at the bottom. They used to be, if a rock got through your grill, it could actually crack open the casing of that. But they've since corrected that. There's actually a block. It still allows air to get through, but it blocks large, debris from getting through and hitting that compressor. And believe it or not, I've heard people it happened to. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The engine has multiple engine mounts. We have one here on the left. That's the main one for the top. From the driver's side, it'd be a left side upper. And then you have a lower one that hooks up to the lower rail. And I've said this before in my other videos. Honda did something smart here. They actually made sure to put these mounts lower, and the reason is because it keeps the center of weight of the vehicle lower. It actually helps the handling. There's the transmission mount on the back side and lower side out of view here. So we have that. We have the engine computer on this side, and the engine computer is covered up for obvious reasons. It needs to be cooled because it's doing a lot of stuff. So it has also a heat sink, what we just talked about on the front here, to allow air to flow over the top of it. Your air filter is here, very easy to release. Remember, you just have pop tabs. So there's one right there, and one on the back side. And when you pull those all off, you should be able to lift right here, and then there's 2 tabs right here. You want to lift forward, and it just pops off. Just put it back together. You want to get these tabs in, so you want to lift this up and push this down. It just slides back in. Pop tabs just clip right back on. It's very easy to do. Really shouldn't pay anyone to do it unless you really don't want to do it. So, depending on the filter you get, 15, 20,000 miles, you want to get that replaced. Odd placement for the the fuse box, which is right here. There's just 3 tabs. You just push in 3 tabs. 1, 2, 3, and it'll just pop out. And if you flip it over, you'll see a diagram of each one of the fuses and what they do. So you can go through depending on what you're trying to look for. Test fuses, you can find it there. They're nice enough to give you a couple extra fuses and a fuse puller. So if you take that fuse puller out, you squeeze it, it will open and allow you to grab your fuses and remove them. Not all cars do that still, I don't know why, but generally it's something you'll find on those cars. So you just take this back on and it just clips back into place. You don't have to do anything special. This sensor, not all cars have this sensor. This is what's called a mass airflow sensor. And what a mass airflow sensor is, another sensor like the O2 sensor. This one's going to take, it's going to measure the amount of air passing through the intake going into the engine, to also use for to decide how much fuel is needed to burn properly. So if this gets dirty, this can cause a lot of problems. And there's a special cleaner that you can get, and it's just 2 screws on top, and then there's a pop connector here that simply just pulls out, and you remove it and you just spray the inside of it, and that's it. Particles do get past the air filter no matter what you do. Some little dust particles will get past it, and eventually this will cause you problems, so it does need to be cleaned, and all you do is just spray it. Do not stick anything inside of there, because all it is 2 little thin electrodes inside there. Not electrodes, but they're little thin wires, and if you damage one of those, you will be buying another one of these, and you're looking at between $70 and $80 to replace that. So just spray it. Don't stick a Q-tip in there. Don't think you're doing anything special by jamming anything down it. So that was basically measuring the air charge that's entering the system and working with the O2 sensor, deciding what the air-field mixture needs to be. So let's see, what else we got? A small battery. Honda uses small batteries. They use stock, they use this green eye battery, and if it is green, that means it's good. They have always used small batteries, and honestly, I've tried to look for things to try to figure out why, but nothing's ever really given me a good reason why. This is your snorkel, whether or not it's a snorkel. Your air is coming in from here. From the bottom, there's a bellow that goes through to quiet down the intake. I modify them. You can do what you want. People get all upset when they see you modify these things. I don't care. This air unit, air box is designed to make this engine as quiet as possible. It's not designed to increase power or anything like that, or MPG. They will suffer a slight MPG drop if it means that someone inside doesn't hear what it sounds like when the engine's running. So remember that. So it has a box. It drops down, and what it's doing is it's passing air over air to try to basically like noise canceling the rush of air that's entering the engine. Now when it comes back up right here, this is where basically like a snorkel, it's taking the air up high. Therefore, if you go through water or anything like that, it's not going to suck it into the engine, because if that happens, you will hydrolock your motor and it will blow the motor. This system also drops water out, so there will be little pinholes every once in a while in it. So if it's sucking air in, if enough water condenses, it will drip down and not enter the intake, which is good as well. That's why a lot of people are anti-intake air intakes, like the aftermarket ones, because you will suck some water in. Not a lot, not as you don't dip the water, but if you're in the rain, this system is designed to get rid of that water almost completely, because it has several areas where it allows the water to condense and get away from it. Snow, same thing. So you'll see up here in the hood, I don't know if actually you can see that with this video. Oh, you can't. There actually is a little rubber louver that's built into here that's to capture air coming in and force it here into this snorkel assembly on the top. Then the air obviously moves through its normal route and enters the air box into the intake and out through the exhaust. So I prefer to keep the OEM unit versus replace it with a cooler sounding intake, but I do like to modify them so that because I don't care if I hear the intake, it doesn't bother me, but it does improve the gas mileage slightly to take off the bellows and just make it a straight airflow. I do not lose the ability to get rid of moisture, but it is louder on the intake, which is I'm perfectly fine with. Now, if you have a CVT transmission, it's going to be a little bit different. That's why I'm not going to really talk about the transmission. The transmission is under all this mess right here. I'm really considering pulling the engine apart, not completely, of course, but getting all the top covers off, everything, so that you can see deeper. And if anyone has any interest in that, let me know. If there's enough interest, I'll make a video. I'll tear this whole thing apart because I've already had, I usually do just to get a feel for it, because I'd like to take my cars apart. I'd like to know what's going on, and I like to keep them clean. Remember, keep your engine clean. And these engines are designed to get washed down. Obviously, you want to be a little careful when you're cleaning things off. You might make sure the engine's not hot, but keep them clean, because if anything's going wrong and your engine's dirty, it's very hard to figure out where the problem is. If you keep it clean and something changes dramatically, it'll change and you'll see it. So that's it for this video today. I hope I went over enough things to help people and get it kind of acquainted with your engine and what it's doing and how it's working. If you have any questions, let me know. I can always make a part 2 of this video. So with that, check out some other videos I have, and I hope this helps you. So have a good day.